Hello and welcome to Life Challenges, better known as A Conversation with Dr. David Clayman. In our previous program, we talked about mental health. We talked about a committee that was put together to address some issues regarding mental health in West Virginia. And Dr. Clayman and his group will present this coming Wednesday, or this week, as the legislature convenes. Today is Monday when we're taping. With all of that said, where do we go and what's your hope? What do you hope to achieve?
Well, one is that when we say mental health, I do not want to offend all the other colleagues in DHHR that we're trying to do all the mental health. We have a very specific goal, which has not surprisingly touched all aspects of care.
Right.
Okay, so that's one of the things I think is really important. We finished our study on time. We delivered the study, and we are presenting the day before the legislature opens, because most people are in, to the Joint Judiciary, where the bill originated. And the bill specifically required that we address 4 populations. And the goal in addressing these 4 populations, because we are forensics, so that means legal,
Right.
Was to try to find a way within each of these populations to divert as many people as we can from the criminal justice system or the court system, however you want to talk about it, and figure out what to do, because we have a number of people in both Sharp Hospital, Mildred Bateman, and then some overflow hospitals. There's a Highland Clarksburg, and we use some other hospitals around the state to take care of the people that have commitment for mental disorders. So it starts off with that. We have a complex behavioral health system in the state. We have, I can't remember how many behavioral health centers, comprehensives. They're undergoing a complete revision on the criteria that they have for treatment. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And what we learned first is we have no, in quotes, mental health system.
Right.
We have a lot of well-meaning and often well-functioning programs that are in isolated places or within one center or within one geographic location, but it's not spread out. And if somebody has an emotional problem in Charleston and they have something happen to them in Clarksburg, getting the information on an outpatient basis or through the regional jail systems or however we get this, we don't have that ability to know what's happening, which really limits care in some ways. Now, the problem with that is we've got a thing called HIPAA, the Privacy Act.
Right.
And we have to find a way, if we're going to collect data, to make that so it's not violating people's rights. So it starts with, our committee has a function for 4 groups. The intellectually developmentally disabled, that's IDD. It can be autism, it can be any congenital defects, it can be acquired defects. We are talking also about cognitive impairment, and we're also talking about traumatic brain injuries. So we have in that one group, we have a large group, and what our contact has been is each of those groups, an individual may behave in a way that results in what appears to be a criminal act. And they're brought either by law enforcement or the families we get people brought to the Mental Hygiene Commissioner, and ultimately a lot of people end up there. So we now are looking how we can do better just from the outset on the mental hygiene side of things. And that becomes the opening of this. We have 6 levels. It's called the Strategic Intercept Model. 0 is before you enter into the criminal justice system, and 6 or 5, because 0 doesn't count, but 5 is what do we do when we get people discharged? So we have intercepts 1 and 2 are while they're outside, but we're functioning, they're going to trial, or they're being evaluated. 3 and 4 are while they're in the system, or 3 is, and then 4 and 5 we're trying to move them out and find what to do so they don't recidivate.
But some of these people are so ill that they really shouldn't be in the legal system per se. They should be helped through the
This is the issue. I mean, we have IDD, we have seriously mentally ill, obviously have substance abuse, and we now have kids, some of the kids that are having trouble. And there's so many things going on, and when we sit down as the steering committee that we have with this, there's three of us that are on the steering committee, we just kind of we shake our heads, because everything involves everybody. We involve law enforcement, we involve the legal system, we involve the mental hygiene system, and it goes on. So if we want to talk to the sheriffs who are responsible for transport in the counties, we have to get to the sheriffs. If we have people that we're talking about what happens in the cities or in the localities, we talk to the deputies. We talk to the deputies, but we also talk to the local cops, because what are they supposed to do? So we have to talk about training and all that. Then we get to the mental hygiene system, and there has been a lot of work done by the Supreme Court working with the mental hygiene system, trying to come up with a solution there, because in some counties we have a mental hygiene commissioner or more than one that's on 24/7. We have some that only have a person that's on a little while or on call. And none of this is judgmental, it's just what it is. And we spend our time getting our eyes open to the fact that there's some things we might be able to do.
I watched the last program, preparing for this program, and all I could think about was the vastness of this.
It's huge.
Well, you start out, everybody's fussing about homelessness. You know, homelessness is ruining our city. Homelessness is ruining our state. But the majority of the homelessness are mentally ill.
No, not the majority. There's a large portion.
There's a portion. Yeah. There's another portion that we've raised the rents to the point they can't afford a place to live. But then there's the portion of mental illness. You've got so much. You've got children now who have all kinds of issues. As I sat there and watched, I thought, was this as prevalent 30 years ago as it is now?
That's interesting. I'm smiling only because I had to put together something to hand to the legislature about who I am and what I've done. And I went into a file and started finding things. And I went online and I found some stuff. And there's been numerous demands that we study the behavioral health system and come up with something to change it. And there's a lot of reasons why this is not working, because it's so, you've just said it. And what happens, this is my opinion solely, I have to do one of those disclaimers, that this is so complex and there's so much else, so many moving parts and so much else going on. We're trying literally to move the chairs around on the Titanic, because it's that big and we're in that much of a crisis of what do we do.
Right.
And I want to use just the mental hygiene system, because the mental hygiene commissioners have a terrible problem, and that is if we have someone who doesn't meet the full criteria to go in the hospital, or if they do, we have the same problem. Where do we put them when the beds are full?
Right.
And when we look at recommendations, for instance, to build, some people want to build another big hospital, which is, in my mind, a mistake, because it's so costly. And,
right.
But if we put various levels of care in the community, and if you kind of look at canals, that the ones that need the most care come in level 1, and they move up and they move up and they move up. Now some of them can get to the top level, but can never be in the community themselves ever.
Right.
Some can be in the community somewhat if they have support. Some of them can be in the community a lot more if they have a family that's capable of doing it. And it goes on, and where they live, how many services they have, can they gain access? Do they have comorbid problems? Comorbid means a behavioral health problem, I'm going to simplify it,
right,
and a substance abuse problem. So we now have to worry about 2. Or what if they're a 14-year-old with a behavioral problem, substance abuse, and they're a juvenile? What do we do with them? And
exactly. It's the same principle as people with mental illness. Your family dies off. What happens when you lose your caregivers?
So, and the interesting thing for us, Sharon, has been our goal was specifically to try to keep people out of prison, out of the criminal justice system, being put in there because they behaved in a way that's brought attention to them in the community,
Right.
or in their homes.
Right.
They can't be handled in the home. Somebody's acting out. They call the cops. Mental hygiene petitions taken out, and then we start again. And we have revolving door, where we have people that we know are going through, and we can't track them yet because we don't have an integrated system. This is not complaint. This is like, I feel like I'm before the holidays when I'm putting my holiday list together of gifts that I want for the holidays, and this is kind of what we're going to present tomorrow. When we talk about what we want for our next step, and I'll get to that. But I just want to make sure you hear that your perception is absolutely 100% right. It is so complex, and we have so much going on, and we're asking people to do so much that we are requesting for our first wish, if Santa is nice to us for next year, or for this year, we already passed, we want our committee to be continued for a year so we can continue studying, to continue work, and continue collecting data. For instance, and you mentioned this, I think before we went on the air, how many, in our study, we're looking at those that have come in contact with the legal judicial system.
Right.
How many people do we now have in each one of the diagnostics, and the people that I work with know those numbers? How many of the people who are at Sharp, for instance, do we think we can get out? Or at Bateman? And put them and allow them to be living in a less restrictive alternative, which is a phrase we use a lot, that is humane.
Is that like a halfway house for us?
Halfway house, community placements, and there's different levels. Some of them are secure forever, that they'll be overseen forever, that they'll just live there because they can't live in the community and they're not safe to be out. That goes to my other committee, which is the Dangerousness Assessment Committee. And we've gotten a lot of calls from people saying, can we use your committee for something else? Can you do this? And I said, no, legislatively we're not allowed to do that yet.
Right.
So we have had a problem with behavioral health. This is my 50th, every time I say that I get depressed. This is my 50th year in behavioral health, working as a professional. And we're still debating the same. I found a 1979 headline from a paper, legislature demands study of mental health.
1979.
79. And there's several others since then. And people come in, and we don't quite understand, but in our group we find out that it's just as if you have, let's just say you're on the autism spectrum, your behavior is, and you know that spectrum is a long spectrum.
Right, we talked about that the last time.
Yeah. And last week I got a call from someone who's very high functioning, and they can't find out of control, behaviorally out of control. And likely, if this continues, they're going to have to be arrested. The cops are going to be called. They're going to have to arrest this person, and this person is going to end up in the adjudicatory system some way. And we have people, Mountain State Justice, West Virginia's Disability Rights. We have a lot of people. I'm doing this on purpose.
Right.
Because what we need is for people to understand that we're trying. Everybody's trying. When you hear about the criminal justice system, and they've had a lot of bad raps, but you don't know how complicated it is when you have massive amounts of people being moved through our regional jails, some of whom are intoxicated or under the influence when they get in. We put them in, they're dangerous. We do an assessment on them, and they're there for 4 days and we can't get anything done, or they're there for a couple days and they do try to hurt themselves. And we do the best we can. We watch them in the regional jails. There's a completely different set of needs when we put them, I don't like those words, but when they're sent to one of our, when we send them to Sharp, there's something different, and we send them to prison, it's something different.
I've got a stupid question.
There ain't no stupid questions in this one.
If mental health is like immigration, in my head, I think it's so big that no one knows where to start. I think it's so big that it's just not comprehensible. But my question is, if I am criminally insane, if I have murdered 3 people and I have been declared criminally insane.
Not guilty by reason of mental illness is our state's
Okay,
saying that.
but all right. I'm going to spend the rest of my life, or my sentence, because I have a life sentence,
At Sharp.
at Sharp. That's where people go. So the Bateman Hospital is for mental illness, and it is.
We have some other, they've had spillage. We've had overflow to go with some of the forensic population. We've tried other things down there. Everything's in flux right now.
But Sharp is mainly.
Sharp is the main place. That's where you go for competency restoration. And we talked last week on competency restoration, or last month. You can go and you can be restored. And then once the court says, yep, you're competent, the other side goes, and that would be, were you criminally responsible?
Right.
That's where the NGRMI is. This gets complicated. And I know I'm geeky, but some people we can't restore to competency.
Right.
So they're now, what do we do with them? What do we do with a person? What can we do? What can we offer a person who is never going to get better?
Now, we're not talking murderers now. We're talking
about everything from people that steal stuff or throw a brick through a window to somebody who murders. We have murderers that are in there forever. So when we have to make a decision, if they're not restorable, again, we got civil rights, we got the law, we got federal, we got state, we got all this stuff. So what our wish list, number one, is we would like to have a forensic interdisciplinary council formally established where we have representatives from the existing 18 entities that we had with input into Senate Bill 232, and then have the chair or the committee have the ability to invite or work with the legislature to bring others on as needed, especially. For instance, it would be great to have a group of people that are specifically IDD, intellectual and developmental disability, to be able to give input. That would be our first, because what we found is like tomorrow, we have a meeting of the discharge planning committee. And I mentioned this last week. This is where we began to see things. Because we had the dangerousness assessment advisory board, at least it gave people a place to contact. And so when we call each other, we talk about what was going on. We had people being released from prison that we had some really interesting problems that demanded just that person maxed out on their sentence, was dangerous, were being released, the family lived out of state. That was the beginning. And then what happened was it demanded on the day, some things happened with the individual. They hadn't been out of prison in 6 years. Sexual offender, another problem. And it took 6 different agency connections on a Saturday to do something to make sure that this person and society was safe. That we didn't put a person on a plane and have him have problems over Kansas or wherever he be, and that anybody that would be around him would not be dangerous. Last week we had another really complicated case, and the mental hygiene commissioner, the sheriff, the police, all of the people there are needed. Social work. We have people that work on committees now, both this interdisciplinary committee, and this is a grassroots, hey, can we get together and talk about these things? Everybody was so excited. We have 80% attendance in that meeting.
Think about, you talked about the one guy who gets out and is dangerous. Think about how many people are involved with this one guy.
One guy.
So that begs the question, do you have enough people to work the system? There's a lot of people. You can read the list of all of the different disorders and all of the different problems.
I'm smiling.
I mean, seriously, there's a lot of people. And plus that, nobody wants to discuss it because it's mental illness, and we don't talk about mental illness.
Well, people are discussing it, but the problem's going to be, and this is, again, how much money do we have to put into this? How much return on our investment, if we do things differently, are we going to see than we've been doing? What's effective? How soon can we start planning? In the correction system, the group that works in discharge on the correction system, which is multidiscipline, multi-agency, starts at the 6-month mark before somebody's going to max out in the sentence. But we have all these people cycling through the homeless, just a whole bunch of groups that have no grounding, no place. What do? Have them go back and live under the bridge again
Yeah.
and not take their medicines? When you try to get into a mental health center now, and again, it's the demand, 3 to 6 weeks sometimes to get set up for a second appointment. In the old days, when I was, back in the old days, we saw everybody weekly. That's what you did. That's the way it was set up.
Right.
And if you maxed out, you didn't take any new patients. It said not taking patients, and as soon as there was an opening, you did it. And then we squeezed people in, and we did this. Well, now, when we call, and even if you call and ask for a favor, it's not going to be right away. And so we have a big surprise, a lack of mental health professionals, and this is national.
Yeah.
We have a lack of institutional settings right now. And when I'm doing this, I'm trying to be very careful, and I'm not the one that's saying the mental health system. But what we found is every one of these 4 groups has the same problems that the non-adjudicatory group has too. Now, it just happens some of these people behave in a way that they get in trouble. And let's leave murder out of it because that's the worst. There's assault. There's overreaction. If you've dealt with somebody that has some of the developmental disorders and they get scared, they start thrashing. People who have some of the intellectual deficiencies, not just autism, but they get worried, they don't understand, they misunderstand, they behave in a way that other people don't understand. People with language disabilities, people with other kinds of that are not adjudicated. Every one of these groups has the same difficulty, even the same as our adjudicated population. Can we identify people earlier? That's one. Do we have a system that can handle it? We put everything on the schools now for kids, which is just crazy because there are enough problems in there. And we have school-based mental health, and we have a society now. One of the national online mental health has 25,000, that's what I just saw, 25,000 therapists practicing telemed. And you can practice telemed anywhere in the country. I've got friends that just sit at home and do telemed all over the country.
Wow.
As long as you're licensed in these other places. And like psychology, I think we have 36 states that we can, if we get this credential, we can work in X amount of time. So this is a big deal. Where do we get them? How can we pay them? You're not going to get a good therapist. You're going to pay $12 an hour. Just isn't going to happen.
No.
And
no.
Now you don't have to be paying a gazillion. Oh, phew, spam. That might be this. I'm waiting to see what happens for tomorrow in the meeting. So what I'd like to get across is our simple first ask is to legislate the interdisciplinary council so that we can meet and mandate that we meet to discuss these issues on a regular basis. The logical part of that would be, if we're doing this for the adjudicated populations, why don't we use this interdisciplinary council to talk about other kinds of problems? Because if we have an IDD, intellectually and developmentally disabled person, an autistic person who's sensory overload and gets upset, and they've never been in the system, but and I said this last time, they hit their mother, they go around the house angry and they break stuff. The cops show up and they beat up on the cops. We've now got 3 criminal charges.
Right.
So, and we're trying to put community intervention programs in that we get people to the house for crisis management. And the thing that I've found difficult is a lot of the things that are being done around the country, they're being done in cities. This strategic intercept model is a city-based model in most places that we put together to try to design interventions for the state of West Virginia. Our little 1.8 million people spread out over this huge amount of space, not in Los Angeles, not in Boston, not in whatever, but all over the state. So this complexity, it would be, one of the things so first one was the council. The second is we would like to spend some time meeting with people on the ground, families, specific organizations that don't feel that they're included in things, so we can get the kind of input we need to see what's going out there. That's going to be one of our second, is to get a little bit more input. But now we want to also begin to talk about data sharing, that we have a data program that can draw from all the different places that we're doing. And this means we have to work with the community behavioral health centers and with DHHR. But the control of forensics for the courts has to be through the Supreme Court. For instance, this is going to sound like a stupid thing. When an order is cut by the circuit court, any one of them in the state, no one in the forensic system right now gets notice that that order has been cut and to whom the individual that's being evaluated is going to go for the evaluation. How's that? So all of a sudden we get something done and they say, well, we just had call it 27-6A. We've just had a 27-6A done in Martinsburg, and they'd found them not competent to stand trial, and the people at Sharp don't even know that there's somebody out there.
So in the state of social media, you have no connections. You have no.
We can't on social media. We can't go and say, "Hi, Sharon
No,
King."
but I'm talking about the fact that we've advanced A1, or AI. We've advanced our capabilities, and that
Data collection's so hard. What do you collect? How do you use it? You know, if you could see the intake forms for the jails and the prisons, they're 5 or 6 pages long. They ask you what kind of shoelaces. I'm being silly, but so the complexities for the mental health system. If we're dealing with, let's say that in the adjudicatory system we have 30 people on the spectrum that are somewhere in the system. How many more people are out in the community? What are we doing? Just heard that there's some movement in some places to create behavior disordered classrooms again, rather than having the kids mainstreamed per se. There's going to be safe rooms and try to have that we don't have these disruptions with the kids. That's the fourth group. Where do we get the input? Do we keep going the same way we've been doing it? And do we keep problem solving the same way we've been problem solving for the past, I've been here 50 years. So we're hoping that we on the 232 study group will get another year. We have some other recommendations for the system. We have some other recommendations for manpower issues within the system so that we can get people through. We have sometimes we have 25 people waiting in the regional jails to get to the hospital to have their competency restoration done.
It is so sad. It is just so sad to look at it and the complexity of it, and to know that it's going to be a long time in
and I want to apologize to all the people the nice people that watch us. I know that I've been yakking about this, but I just want you to hear, when people demand change, taking care of the regional jails, doing this for mental health,
right,
covering this, it ain't easy. And one thing triggers, we figured about 8 different other things if we have to take care of it.
We'll return to you after session and give you an update. On behalf of Dr. Clayman, I'm Sharon King, thanking you for watching the Library Television Network. Till next time, bye-bye.
I almost think